focus of today's session is we're going to be looking at the Klevr Contracts application, which is a full-fledged contract management application that's built within the Microsoft Dynamics platform. Alongside Klevr Contracts, we're going to look at how Copilot has been seamlessly integrated and allows Klevr Contracts users to benefit from the powers of AI within the solution itself. Sticking on the AI theme today, I've used a tool called OpenArt.ai to generate some logos for some of the demo organizations that we'll look through for their contracts today. So as we go through the system, I'm going to be acting as an employee of the Bright Future Foundation. And the Bright Future Foundation has 4 contracts that we'll look at as part of their community impact partnership strategy. One is with the Ozcare Philanthropic Trust. One is with the Hopewell Mental Health Services, which is where we'll do most of our presentation today. And then they have another one with Eco Supplies Limited, who is going to be supplying some supplies for their mental health clinics. Within the contract group, there is also one additional subcontract between Hopewell Mental Health Services and Mind Metrics, who are going to be doing some reporting and analysis on the patient and clinic data that comes out of the mental health workshops that HMHS is running for us. With that being said, I'm just going to stop presenting and I will share screen. Luke, if you can please let me know once that comes up.
Will do. Oh, I can see that from my side, Richard. You're all good.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke. So before we actually jump into some of the capabilities of Klevr Contracts, we're going to start by highlighting one of the really cool functionalities with Copilot natively integrated. And so on the right in the toolbar here, we have the Copilot icon. And if I select that icon, I can see that I can actually query information within the database through a chat-like user experience without having to navigate through the system. So I've created some prompts beforehand, so you don't have to watch me type them out. And if I enter this prompt, so essentially what this prompt is doing is I'm asking the AI to Copilot to tell me about the Hopewell Mental Health Services, which is one of the organizations that exists within the system. Now, as you can see, it's been able to find that account and it's given me some brief information. This is really compelling because it means that I can ask questions from anywhere within the system and get some information without having to navigate to the individual record to find it. We can take this another step further and I'll ask a little bit of a more complex prompt. So here I'm going to ask to tell me information about different milestones that are associated with the service delivery contract that we have with the Hopewell Mental Health Services organization. Once again, the Copilot has been able to look through the database and it's found that there are 3 milestones associated with that. And it's also provided me the names and due dates of those milestones. So I'll bring back to this later, but you can verify and make sure that it's worked correctly. But this is really nice because it allows users to just have that information at their fingertips. I don't have to navigate to the account, to the contract, and then to the milestone to get it. I can simply ask that question. I can remain doing my work on the contract group record that I'm currently looking at. So I'll just close that for now so that we can get a wider view of our contract group. Now, contract groups are set up within Klevr Contracts to allow you to group contracts together where those contracts have a logical relationship. At the top here, we're going to have some familiar fields. So we have a code which can be used for searching and reporting purposes. And then we have an external reference and tag, which you're going to see that those fields on quite a lot of the tables that we'll look at today. External references allows us to capture external IDs for when we're integrating with other systems, and then tags allow us to apply tags to records, once again, for reporting and searching capabilities. We can also see the name of our contract group and also a description of what we're trying to achieve with the contracts within this contract group. Navigating down on the screen, we have our group statistics, and at the bottom here, you can see that we have our 4 contracts that were mentioned on the demo slide. The main contract that we're going to be looking at today is our service delivery contract that we have with the Hopewell Mental Health Services organization. We also have a contract with Eco Supplies, who's going to be giving us or provisioning some supplies to us at our mental health clinic. And then we actually have a contract with Ozcare Philanthropic Trust where we're receiving funds on the back of a grant that we've applied to. The last contract that we have here is a subcontract, and this is actually a contract between HMHS and MindMetrics. As mentioned before, they're going to be doing some capturing and reporting on the patient clinic data that comes out of the workshops that HMHS are running for us. We then have two calculated fields at the top here. So we have the last end date, and what this is going to do, it's going to dynamically update as new contracts are added to the group, but it will give us the future-most date. So we can see when this total contract group is going to close. Some of these contracts might close before then, but we want to see at what point is the final contract in this group going to close so that we can close out the entire contract group. We also have our total contract value. Now, if anyone's a math whiz, they can do the math quickly. But the main thing I want to highlight is that the subcontract amount is not included in this total value. The reason for that is subcontracts are set up with a primary contract, and this subcontract belongs to the service delivery contract. So the 50,000 here has already been allocated within the 500,000. So we do not count that amount twice. And so we see that that 50,000 is not included in this total contract value. Now, if I wanted to get more information about a specific contract, I can select the Related Contracts tab. And let's say we want to take a deeper look at the service delivery contract. We can now see that the service delivery contract record that we have with the Hopewell Mental Health Services organization has appeared. And straight away at the top of the screen, we have what's known as a business process flow. But essentially, this gives us a really nice snapshot where we can see what stage of the life cycle this record is currently at. It also gives us capabilities at each stage to make sure we're capturing the correct information so that you have good data consistency and good business processes built in that cannot be violated. Navigating down on the contract page, we have our contract information. Once again, we have our contact, our code. We'll skip past extended number and come back to that later. We have the name of our contract, and then we have an account and contact. So with all contracts, we'll typically have an account that's associated with that contract, and then a contact person that's going to be the key contact, usually an external stakeholder. We also support the functionality to have beneficiaries here. So if you wanted to, you could have an account that has raised a contract, but is actually on behalf of a separate organization. In the middle of the screen, we have our financial information. So here we can see the contract amount. So this is a contract amount of $500,000, and the annual amount has been calculated based on the key dates here. So these key dates, the start and end date, are spanning over 3 years. So this annual amount has calculated based on those key dates for us. Lastly, we have our contract document field. Now, this field is intended to upload the final or current version of the contract document. It is very possible and very likely that multiple documents will be associated with a contract record. And if we were to navigate to the Files tab, you would be able to have that native integration due to the Microsoft platform with SharePoint and use SharePoint as your document management system. However, this field here is intended to capture the final or most current version of the actual PDF document for the contract so that users can quickly navigate to and find and download that if they need to. The last two sections we have on this page are our categorization section. So within a contract management system, there's very likely going to be different types of contracts that are being managed. And then we have our system type, whether it is a fixed term contract, a claims-based, or potentially even a subcontract. You can see our link to the contract group that we started on. And then we have primary contract if it's a subcontract, whether or not it's all of government, and potentially the procurement type for this contract. Lastly, on this form, we have our key stakeholders. So the contract manager and responsible manager are looking up to different employees at the Bright Future Foundation. And this is really important for both transparency, visibility, and accountability. So we can make sure that the correct people are across and continuing to do and monitor the tasks that they need on that contract record. It also makes it very easy for us to drive automated notifications if there are updates or key things that are happening with this contract that we can notify or escalate to different key people on the contract record to ensure things are done correctly and on time. So moving from the summary tab, we're going to move to the activities tab, and we're going to see the timelines component. Now, the timeline component is another one of those really nice out-of-the-box tools with Microsoft platform. And what the timeline gives us is a historical correspondence of all historical record of all the correspondence and communications associated with this record. Like I said, in this instance, we're looking at a contract, but it can be associated with transactions, milestones, any of those tables that exist within your system. The timeline's going to fill up with things like phone calls, appointments, emails, notes, tasks. It could be both internally and externally. It could be me talking with Luke about this contract and deciding how we should do things for the Bright Future Foundation, or it might be me reaching out to a contact at HMHS with an email of a draft of the contract, for instance. I can navigate through this timeline. I can find those individual correspondences, and then I can click in and see a very specific up-to-date record of what has happened and how we got to today's state. This is the second area where Copilot really shines. So here you can see at the top what's known as the timeline summary. This is something that we at Walker Scott use quite heavily, but this timeline summary reads through the records within the timeline, and it gives me key information that exists in those records. So here on this contract record, we can see that there was a meeting for a final walkthrough of the contract document to make sure that all the agreed terms are reflected correctly. We can also see that at some point I sent a revised contract draft with updated data protection clauses, and that is awaiting David's approval. This is really nice because it allows everyone to go in and quickly get the context of where this record is at. It also allows other users to come in and without having to read through the entire timeline, which can get quite heavy when there's a lot of correspondence, they can get that brief snapshot so they can then go on with their tasks or communications as they need to with that information in mind. So nextly, we're going to jump in past the financials. We'll come back to that in a second. We're going to move to the terms tab. Now, there's a couple of different terms that are associated with contract. We have payment terms. In this instance, we can see that we're doing payments 1 month in advance, and you have the ability to capture any payment terms notes. We have our renewals section, so we can see the renewal date. We can also see the renewal period that renewal must be done by. And then we have right of renewal, whether or not either side of this contract has the right to automatically renew, and then whether or not this contract may automatically roll over. On the right, we have our termination period. So you could enter a termination notice. Maybe there's a 30-day termination notice. Currently, the end date is matching the end date of the contract. However, when we get at the end of the presentation, when we talk about contract actions, we'll talk about how you can terminate a contract preemptively, and it will update that value and allow you to capture any termination notes that happen at that point as well. Moving along, we have our terms and conditions tab. So what this allows us to do is build out a library of different terms and conditions that you can easily then associate with different contracts within the system. This is really efficient because instead of having to try to copy and paste terms and conditions against different contracts and keep things up to date, you can have those sets of terms and conditions within the system. And as you're working on drafting a contract record, you can easily apply them to your contract. Next, once our terms are set up and our terms and conditions are done, we need to make sure that there are milestones associated with the contract. So as part of a contractual agreement, we'll either be giving money and expecting work to be completed, or we'll be receiving money and having to do some work ourselves. So within contracts, we have the ability to have multiple milestones. And within each of these milestones, we can have multiple deliverables as well. So I'm going to select the initiate and setup milestone, initial setup and program launch. And for today's demo, we can see that we've gone all the way through the life cycle of this milestone record. Now, this milestone record did have 3 objectives that needed to be completed in order to satisfy this milestone completion. So we had our program setup plan needed to be created. We needed to make sure that resource acquisition was completed so that we had people at the mental health workshops that were being ran. And then we needed to make sure that the staff training was completed so everyone knew how to run those workshops. Back on the summary tab, we can see our milestone information on the left, including the contract that it was associated with and a description of this milestone. And then we can see a key contact for this milestone, which may be different than the key contact on the contract. And we also have a due date for this for this milestone. Lastly, on the right, we have an internal decision. So oftentimes when a contract is set up, external stakeholders will submit reports or whatever needs to be done, proof that that milestone has been accomplished. So with the Klevr Contracts application, we have another product called the Klevr Portal, which essentially allows you to extend your CRM data through an external stakeholder portal where users can log in and they can quickly see contracts and milestones associated with their organization. So here you can see that I'm logged in and I have the 2 open milestones. And then we also have the completed milestone that we're currently viewing from within the Klevr Contracts application. We can see the 3 milestone objectives that needed to be met. And because this milestone's already been submitted through the portal, there are no actions that need to be done at the portal at this time. However, potentially, if during internal review of that milestone within Klevr Contracts, I might need to provide some additional information or additional documents through the portal. Once an external stakeholder has submitted their milestone, a notification will be sent to the relevant person on the contract, potentially the contract manager that we saw on the contract form. And they need to come in and they need to review the documents that were uploaded through the external stakeholder portal and decide whether or not that milestone has been met. In this instance, we can see that internal decision was made. It was approved. It was approved on the 9th, and that there are no additional, or there was no notes taken at that time. The last functionality that's really important on milestones, if you see the transactions tab, when we move to the financials on contracts in a section, we're going to talk a little bit about contract transactions. And here you can see that we have the ability to associate contract transactions with milestones to ensure that the funds within those contract transactions are only released on successful approval or successful internal approval of the associated milestones. With that segue, we will navigate back to our contract record and we'll go to the financials tab. Now on the financials tab, this is quite a visual section. So we have our contract information on the left, so we can see the contract amount and the annual amount fields that we saw before. Then we also have this important field, which is the total unallocated amount. It's possible that within a contract, you might have multiple contract budgets. And here we can see the different budgets that have been set up that need to, that are going to allocate all of the funds within the contract. In this instance, we can see that the total amount of 500,000 has been allocated and that there's 0 unallocated amount left. On the right side, we have a nice visual chart to show us how the total contract amount is split up between the different budgets within the contract. And we can see that we have this counseling services one is by far the biggest piece. So we'll jump into this contract budget. And here we can see some information on the budget itself. In this instance, we can see that the counseling services for 250,000. This is a payable budget type. So you can have both payable and receivable budgets within the same contract. So it's possible to both pay and receive money within one contract. And then on the right side, we can see the different budget types. Once again, within a contract management system, it's very likely there'll be multiple budget types. You can have both ad hoc one, plan ones, and then you can have other ones for reporting purposes. Lastly, one of the important fields that we have here is the integration document type. And the intent of this is to be used with our productized and patternized integration to finance systems. Now, obviously, as Walker Scott is aligned with Microsoft, we're very comfortable integrating with both BC and F&O, and those patterns and touch points between Klevr Contracts and those finance systems are well established. However, it's built to be finance system agnostic, and we can integrate to other systems as well. If the budget type is set up as a scheduled budget type, then you're going to have a scheduled section that appears at the bottom. And here we can set up things like the start and end date, and then the recurrence information. So for this schedule, we can see it's a monthly recurrence. It's going to happen on the 1st of each month, and it's going to happen every 3 months. So essentially, this is quarterly payments for this planned contract budget. So once we have all of our financials set up, we can see that our total contract amount has been allocated. We can click on the financials tab and we can say that we can move across to the next stage. So what this is going to do, it's going to move us to the next stage of the contract lifecycle, and it's going to ask me if I want to request any approvals. So approvals are quite important within Klevr Contracts, and essentially what's set up is configurable approvals, so that within each records, it could be contracts, transactions, or milestones, anything that approval might need to apply to. You'll have the ability to set up groups of people that will receive approvals based on configuration on that record. It might be the amount that a contract is for, it might be the department that a contract is in, but it allows you to have multiple steps of approval based on different information on that contract record. For today's demo, I've put myself in the group, and you can see by clicking the request approval button, I've been given an approval field. Now, if I refresh this page in the ribbon here, you'll see that I get an approve button, which will allow me to easily go to that record and I can approve or disapprove the contract. This all looks good to me. So once this loads, I'm going to decide that, yep, everything looks fine, and I will approve this record so that we can then activate it. So I'll hit the approve. It will give me an option to approve or decline, add some comments. Won't add any comments today. And this is going to update that approval record. We can now see that the record approved will update to yes. And if I navigate to the approvals tab, we can see that this has been completed and the approval reason is yes. So now that it's been approved, we're going to activate this contract. And what this will do is it will activate the contract. And at the top, we have some contract action buttons. So these actions are really important within the system, and there's some functionality behind each one. But I have the ability to suspend or cancel an action, which is going to bring up a pop-up where I can enter the date of that contract action. I can also enter a reason and any additional notes. This creates a record known as contract action, which is associated with the contract, which remains in the system, so that as the contract goes on, you might have multiple suspensions, or you obviously want only one cancellation, but you can easily go back into the record and you can see who did that action at what time and why that action was carried out. Importantly, we also have the renew and revise capabilities. So I'll bring you back to the extended number at the bottom here. After the colon, we have 2 zeros. Now, the first zero is going to tell us the version of the contract we're on, and the second number is going to tell us the variation number we're on. If I click either the renew or the revise button, it's going to clone the original contract record and create a brand new record. It will toggle this number based on whether or not I'm doing a contract variation or a contract renewal. And it will bring across all of the information that is once again controlled via configuration. So I can maybe potentially copy everything except just the start and end dates. This also supports deep cloning. So if you have things like a large list of terms and conditions or milestones and milestones objectives associated with the contract, those will all be cloned with that same record. It creates a new record in a draft state and gives you the ability to edit that record. And then once that record is completed and ready to go, you can activate the newly created contract record. And at that point, the original record will be deactivated. So you only have one active record in the system at a time. I know I went 1 or 2 minutes longer than I was supposed to, so I will stop there and hopefully we can rattle off a quick Q&A section.
Cool, thanks, Richard. We have had a couple of questions come through. I've tried to answer some of them as we go. One question from Sangshep around, I'm assuming this is around the Copilot features and whether they're in public preview or whether they're launched. I'm not sure. I'd need to go and have a look at that myself. I'm not sure if you've seen anything, Richard.
Yeah, it's a bit of a combination. It's also a good point in terms of how Microsoft rolls these out. So there is another Copilot feature within the system that that I've actually toggled off for this environment, something that we don't find very helpful. It's a bit invasive at the moment. And at Walkerscope, we definitely pride ourselves in telling you what is good and what is not good about what we're implementing. There's something called auto suggesting, where you'll get a tab at the top where it will auto suggest and fill out some of these fields for you. And then it will allow you, when you save records, to decide whether or not you want to keep them. It does its best to only do that in fields where it thinks you have common answers across records. However, we find that it's not quite accurate enough to be more benefit than it is good.
Yep.
However, similarly to the Copilot chat, when this feature first came out, it was not as useful as it is today. It's definitely gotten a lot better. Microsoft's continually investing in it. And so I'm sure as they continue to do that investment and that the model behind that auto suggest functionality gets improved, that will become a feature that's more widely used within different systems.
Yep. Cool, thank you. And we had a couple of other questions from Janine as well around automation and around the possibility of being able to upload like a PDF or a Word version of a contract and using probably a combination of maybe Copilot and Power Automate, which is the Dynamics 365 automation tool to automatically create your contract record and the related records. We don't have that as an out-of-the-box feature at the moment, Janine, with our Klevr Contracts products. and there'll be a bunch of variables around how successful you would be with that, whether the contract documents are in a consistent format, whether they have common labels, whether there's enough information there for Copilot to be able to understand the content of the document. But you may be able to automate part of the process, and something I'd be really keen to chat with you about in a separate session if you would be keen to. And if I got it right, I think they were the main questions that we had, Richard, in the chat, which brings us bang on 1 p.m. New Zealand.
Awesome. Cool. So with that being said, obviously, if there are any more questions, please feel free to reach out. If there are, if you'd like to get a more deeper demo or more tailored demo of how Klevr Contracts could be used within your organization, please let us know, and we will definitely make sure that happens. And if you have any questions about how Klevr Contracts can integrate to finance systems as well, we'd be more than happy to have that chat with you.